everybody. Happy Halloween and welcome to Accelerating Your Digital Transformation. I hope everybody's having a spectacular Wednesday here. My name is Greg Felice. I'm a digital engagement lead with Google. I'm going to be walking you through some material today that is of interest to you and of value to you as well. Joined by my colleagues Raymond and Stephanie who are going to be helping me through this presentation. So welcome Raymond, welcome Stephanie to the call as well. In my role as digital engagement leads, I basically work with companies to help them grow their API program and help them scale it. So part of that is just getting them up and running quickly, helping them accelerate their program, and then helping them scale it. And I hope that this is a little probably for those of you who are involved in some sort of a digital transformation company, this may resonate with you. Us have been through many of these. We all know that digital transformation crashes the organization and you run up against fun stuff like capital budgeting months and other things that are kind of typically disrupted by the work that we do. A little bit about Apogee, a little bit about what we do. So essentially we focus on providing digital transformation via API management, right? And APIs basically are application programming interfaces. They're software, and they're a way for a company to expose business capabilities to both external and internal developers. And people then use these APIs to power their platform and their strategies. So digital transformation, we're often talking about vectors of disruption, things that are changing the business landscape very radically, creating new threats, new opportunities, disrupting traditional businesses. And along with the usual suspects of cloud and big data, a lot of platform strategies on the block are vectors of disruption as well that are really upsetting traditional companies, allowing new entrants to dominate in new markets, essentially platform strategies. Now, what we do when we're working with companies and developing an API strategy, a platform strategy, an ecosystem strategy for them, is we want to take a look at their digital transformation program. And the way that we do this, the way our work begins is to work with them to develop a view of the vision, alignment, and execution of their digital transformation. Now, we've in work with hundreds of companies, have developed some points of view about how this conversation goes and how it typically. So on the right, you'll see some of the key dimensions where we ask questions of the customer to get some sort of a sense as to how well the transformation program is running, and then try to look for opportunities to see how we can help them overcoming some of the challenges that they face. Now, one of the ways that we do this is we have a tool called Apogee Compass. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. This factors into the digital transformation and the API program conversation. Apogee Compass is an assessment tool that we use to measure your company's capabilities, the 10 dimensions that we showed. And we use Apogee Compass with our face-to-face, but you can also access the tool online, take the assessment for yourself. And it will give you a digital maturity, and we'll provide you recommendations on getting your transformations effectively unstuck based upon the score and some recommendations that Apogee provides. Now, the great thing about Apogee is we developed this tool. In the data that we've collected with Compass, we've seen a couple of different patterns, and we want to share those patterns with you. Now, the majority of the companies that we are working with are starting to develop some form of a platform strategy and a digital transformation strategy. Now, there's an emerging group that's thinking about the larger digital ecosystem that extends beyond the four walls of their business. And there's work being done to formulate a digital vision and a digital strategy, but there's some key things that typically hold their execution back. So while the vision may be forming inside of companies, the execution is facing a challenge for a lot of different companies. Now, some of these things that we want to cover on the slide, these are some of the patterns that we've seen. While a transformation strategy may exist, while a platform strategy may be emerging, we're seeing that often API programs and the platform transformation programs and digital transformation programs may be something that's viewed more as an integration investment and a cost and efficiency strategy rather than something that is viewed as strategic to the business. Often we see challenges with executive support for these programs as well. And while the vision may be mature and fully formed, many of these programs lack that executive support and that leadership to really have it be a top of mind concern across the organization. And then thirdly, a pattern that we notice is that the transformation strategies, the API programs, often lack a self-service component, which reduces friction to participate on the platforms that the businesses seek to develop. And this lack of self-service capability and this increase in friction will often cause adoption in the API program and strategy to suffer. So these are some of the patterns that we are seeing. If we were to sum it up, I think we put this slide together because we feel that the vision is coming together inside many companies for APIs and for digital transformation. And this aspiration is becoming more and more common. It's easy to have that aspiration, but it's the execution where things seem to be breaking down. That's the hurt. I'll pause for a moment. I think many of you on the call who may be trying to navigate the complexities of the digital transformation, you may have that vision in sight, the individuals on this phone right now. And this can be a challenging journey. Navigating the roadmap of a digital transformation is not a trivial matter. So if you're going through that and you're feeling this pain and this is resonating, give yourself a hug. You're not alone. You're probably other people that are feeling the same way. When we talk in terms of digital transformation, there's two principles that we believe are really central. And I basically want to mention that as we talk through these digital transformation principles, APIs will be a recurring technical theme here throughout. So the first principle that we want to talk about is that modern business really isn't just about adopting a mobile strategy or using the cloud to generate efficiency savings. Undoubtedly, these are key components of the digital transformation strategy. They're probably in your strategy and your roadmap. But importantly, we view this transformation as something that is about embracing a shift in the nature of supply and demand. And we're going to break that down across the next few slides. In order to kind of explain this principle and talk through it, I'd like to use Ticketmaster, Apogee and Google customer, as an example. Okay. Now, we're going to walk through an evolution of Ticketmaster's business. And we're going to start with Ticketmaster in their original state as something that we might call an early digital business. This should be and kind of a set of structures that to the audience on the call today. Now, Ticketmaster in this case is bringing their supply, which in this case is obviously tickets to shows, and bringing that to customer demand via some very typical channels that we might expect. For example, ticket phone lines or the Ticketmaster website. Now, in this case, the development team, perhaps on staff, contracted out. But essentially what we see is that there's some fit-for-purpose channels that they expose to the customers and to that demand in order to drive to that demand and basically drive their business. It's a very typical model, probably no surprises here. Now, when we talk about the shifting nature of supply and demand, I want to build this concept here. The new model, we still have the Ticketmaster supply, but we've basically empowered with APIs, okay? The traditional development team in this case has now decided to develop their programs using an API management platform. And they're exposing the services that they're basically exposing their services, their business services, via the API layer. And what we'll see is that the Ticketmaster phone lines and the Ticketmaster website still exist, but we've achieved a couple of benefits here just by introducing the API technical capability. There's architecturally loose coupling. So, and there's a higher level of business agility because the APIs allow the Ticketmaster development team to respond to business changes and to new requests much more easily than they might if that API layer didn't exist. So the webmaster, the Ticketmaster website, and perhaps some phone line capability that are software driven. There's a faster time to market and a lot more flexibility and reusability introduced because of the APIs. But here's where the shift comes into play. We're going to introduce a developer as a customer that exists outside of the Ticketmaster business. Now, this developer may be making a decision to look for and to buy and to use Ticketmaster APIs to fuel some part of their business. We're going to see Costco came along and decided that they wanted to inject into their digital experience a ticket purchasing scenario, and they were going to leverage these Ticketmaster APIs in order to do so. And then Fox developers, third-party developers came along and did the same thing on some of the Fox Sports digital properties and digital experiences. Facebook came along. Facebook developer community started leveraging Ticketmaster APIs as well, as did Broadway.com. Now, the picture that we're painting here, interesting one, because by virtue of exposing their business services as APIs and thinking about an external developer as a customer, they've been able to open up Ticketmaster business services across a much broader range of demand and onto properties and into digital experiences that they no longer own. But the net result of this is channels of demand for Ticketmaster services increase dramatically. All right. So when we talk about rethinking demand, this is really what we're talking about as a key organizing of digital transformation. Now, if we take this example further, we're going to see something where the API platform and the API technology capability also allows Ticketmaster, in this case, to start orchestrating new business services and new technical capabilities that they no longer have to invest in or develop in-house. So orchestrating things like Google Dialogflow via APIs, taking that capability and integrating it into their phone services or their phone line channels may revolutionize that channel of operation and that channel through which their customers are purchasing tickets. Now, this is great because Ticketmaster, their business is probably not developing capabilities like Dialogflow, but utilizing APIs, they're able to orchestrate these new business services, differentiate their business significantly. Now, the third example we want to provide completes this explanation of this principle is a scenario that we see with some of our more mature customers where they're starting to think about how new sources of supply could potentially be aggregated into and through the channels of demand that Ticketmaster has now been able to attract and expand out. Because they control demand, because they've provided all these new channels of demand, Ticketmaster is now in a powerful position to start aggregating ticket provider services underneath their umbrella, all via APIs, and exposing them via their demand channels, potentially monetize that relationship where they are controlling the relationship of supply and demand on their platform. And now this is a true platform strategy that we're talking about. And we plays back to the idea of this principle of rethinking the nature of supply and demand. Now, the takeaway, we've tried to sum this on a slide. The transformative conversation here is around moving from a limited supply controlled by Ticketmaster through limited and often purpose-built channels, such as their website and their phone lines, to distributed value creation across an ecosystem of digital participants on the demand side and the supply side. We can see that Ticketmaster is now benefiting from services that they don't need to build, in the case of Dialogflow, and they're aggregating, importantly, supply that they don't even own and bringing it to market and then taking, okay? Now, the bottom line here is that there's, for Ticketmaster to develop channels, they don't have to own them. So the investment, the initial investment in developing these channels, the cost of ownership exists because they're using API to drive these relationships and these new business dynamics. And there's fractional costs for them to orchestrate new business services that they don't own. Okay? All right, now that's principle one. We want to show some examples of this in action in a little bit more detail. Now, Walgreens is a customer of Apogee and Google that's done a fantastic job of thinking of this developer that we talk about in slides as a customer and exposing Walgreens business services, in this case, via APIs out to that developer so that they can start consuming them and driving value through those channels. Okay? This is what we call the developer portal, which is something where the developer would go to and make a decision to use the Walgreens APIs or business services via the Walgreens API. Okay? And what the net result for Walgreens has been, we're just going to throw up some statistics here. I think the most impactful number here that I love is that the number of prescriptions per second being filled via mobile devices that are basically being powered by APIs is over 1 a second. And the number of patients now accessing prescriptions via third-party applications, so that's applications that Walgreens have not developed, not invested in building, but are powered via these API channels, is now reaching 40 million. And the numbers of partners or third-party developers who are participating in the Walgreens developer program and utilizing these APIs to generate value for their business is now in excess of 100. Okay, so now we're going to move to the second principle. There's a lot of information, but essentially principle one is rethinking the nature of supply and demand, and that being a true transformative dynamic that you need to take into consideration. Now, principle two, I think that this will probably resonate with a lot of the people on the line. It's bigger than just IT investments or even platform strategies. And this kind of alludes back to some of the problems and challenges that we saw that were surfacing in the data that we're getting from Compass, right? It's often viewed strictly through an IT lens. But these successful digital journeys are going to require an overhaul of the organization's operating model. We often represent this as we talk in terms of a chasm of dysfunction, which represents both sides of an organization, technical side and the business side, a different set of concerns, a different set of vocabularies, and especially with something as technical sounding as an API-driven strategy, and understand how it may be difficult to bridge that gap and bridge that divide and help the overall organization understand that they need to move forward in order to seize these new business opportunities that we talked about, that we're going to be asking, right? And if companies want to drive new sources of revenue via these API programs, much as we discussed with Ticketmasters, there's going to be new questions that we'll ask. Okay? A lot of these companies, again, will classify APIs as technical infrastructure, and they will fail to make the necessary adjustments to their go-market strategy, to their organizations, and to their product management approaches. Okay. Now, there's going to be, and we find that just even speaking these questions kind of helps people concretize what this means. If you have an API program similar to what we saw with Walgreens or with Ticketmaster, who will be choosing to market that? Who will be producing the go-to-market strategy for the program? Do they understand the developer persona, the developer as a customer that needs to be marketed? And be reaching out to those platforms that represent huge ecosystems, that represent new markets and sources of untapped demand for your organization. Who might be speaking with those platform owners? For example, the Broadway.com, the Costco. Who might be leading that conversation or even spearheading that deal where considerations around who takes what percentage of the revenue or the profit from that new channel that's been opened up? Who's going to be leading that conversation? And who may be seeking creating business services in the market that we might want to orchestrate and plug into our existing products in order to increase our success in our market? You can see that all of these questions have a business flavor to them. And getting sides of the organization, the business, technical, on the same page is a significant challenge. But these are the questions that need to be in order to develop these strategies and basically extract this value. Now, something important that we're going to hit upon here is that one very key thing to hammer is thinking about this developer that we talk about as external to your organization as a customer, and the fact that you are designing and managing products for them as a customer. Okay. Now, we're going to show you this slide. Simply talks about a buying product experience, which may be very, very different than traditional organizations who may be thinking in terms of APIs as a means to integrate system A to system B, right? Or they may be doing a budget approval, they may be doing internal specifications, they may be doing resource teams. That is very different than what we see here, where a third-party developer who's not part of your organization will want to learn about your API product, will want to buy or acquire it, perhaps on a limited basis to test it out and see if they want to make a larger purchasing decision. They're going to want to get it quickly. We use a term called 5 minutes to hello as representing a good buying experience or acquisition experience of an API for a developer as a customer. So you might ask yourself, is your organization close to that? Or is it more similar to 40 days worth of legal compliance paperwork in order to even get access to your APIs? Of course, they're going to want to use it. They're going to want to use it. They're going to want to pay for it in the cases where your API program may be mature enough that you're monetizing. And they're going to want to understand where they can go for support. These are more product-oriented considerations that are geared towards attracting that developer as a customer that will need to be taken into consideration going forward. Okay, so we're going to do a quick quiz here. We talked about a lot of different anti-patterns, a lot of different challenges that people will typically see with their digital transformation and the first programs. So what we simply want to do is we're throwing up these three anti-patterns, and we want to give the audience a chance to respond and say which of the three resonate with you the most. Of these three anti-patterns are you currently seeing or maybe have seen in the past with your API first or digital transformation program? Just going to put them up on the screen, give you guys an opportunity to read them, and then we're going to go to a poll, which you guys will be able to participate in. Rise quickly, there's inside out versus outside in. What we're talking about here is situations where companies make API strategies or API first strategies as purely a technical or an IT side initiative, rather than a product-focused and developer as customer-focused initiative. The middle is a funding model and measuring the wrong things, which may box your program in, and you may be measuring different measures of success, such as API uptime or performance versus how much stickiness, what kind of new audiences am I attracting via this API? How many new third-party developers and applications have signed up that are now utilizing our APIs? And then ultimately, KPIs around how much revenue are we driving via those new channels, right? And then the third anti-pattern is, well, we want to build this ecosystem. We want people consuming our APIs. We want people producing them. But there's so much friction to participate on both sides, right? So with those explained, I'm just going to go quickly to this poll and give you guys an opportunity to respond, and then we're going to look at the results. So what we see here is, first of all, it looks like these resonate with the audience, inside out versus outside in being, okay, so it's some of you may be trapped on the IT side of the house with your initiative. It may be viewed as an opportunity to expose all of your services simultaneously, as opposed to thinking from the customer perspective in. So we see that as the dominant one here, but it's a pretty even split. Wrong funding model and KPIs. A lot of people are, so if we look at this as all of the participants on this call, what percentage of you are experiencing these anti-patterns? It looks like we did hit, at least some of these resonate with you, right? And then in terms of some representation there as well. Okay, so the takeaway here is if 85% of you are feeling the inside out versus outside in, that means the majority of you are on this call, well, are experiencing all three of these, right? So these are the patterns that we typically see talking about them. And, you know, when we go through Compass and that exercise, what you'll see is that we ask these questions, we surface these problems inside your organization, and then we help you devise solutions to overcome these obstacles and get your digital program back on track. Okay. All right, thanks everybody again for participating in this. We're going to move through the material. Where are we? Let's take stock here for a second. So we've introduced Compass. We've talked about digital transformation. We've talked about two key principles that we see as really important and central to developing your API first and your transformation strategy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try Apogee Compass. So first of all, I'm going to welcome all of you to go to the URL on your screen because we'll be able to do this assessment together, okay? And as I'm working with my colleague Ray, you guys will be able to conduct this assessment and answer these questions along with us. And then at the end, you can see your results and maybe even ask some questions based off of that. Now, I'm going to play the role that I'm playing right now, digital transformation, who's going to conduct an assessment with Ray, who's also a digital engagement lead, but today he's going to be playing the part of a customer. So Ray, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little bit of background for the character you're going to be playing today.
All right, great. Thanks, Greg. So my character for Halloween is Dracula. Oops. You're asking me about my actual company character.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. So I'm a digital engagement lead, as Greg said. For today, we consult with a lot of different customers out there. And the character I'm going to play today is as a API program lead for a financial services company, specifically a bank, a large one.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Ray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen right now, and we're going to show Apogee on Apogee Compass on. Okay, so what you'll see, just a tool, is this is at transform.apogee.com or compass.apogee.com or via the URL that you used that we showed. This is the Apogee Compass tool that we use to ask those key questions of our customers around the vision, alignment, and execution of their digital transformation program. So we're going to walk through this. And Ray, thank you for participating as the executive within a large bank. And I'm going to put in the assessment here.
All right.
Okay, Ray, let's talk about your business. Let's talk about from a platform perspective. What is your platform vision or your digital business vision at this moment? Tell me a little bit about that, Ray.
Yeah. First of all, very deep question here. For us, as an enterprise, we have our API program is really about enabling other teams. So we've got a platform, we see APIs as a digital platform in order to enable a lot of the different channels out there. So I think when this question is like, what is your digital business vision? I mean, we certainly have digital channels like web and mobile banking. They're leading by example and generating more deposits and loans through the digital channel. But we also want to look at ways in which we can take some of our core assets and our data and monetize those. But it's taken a little while. So it's not an entire organization enterprise thing. So I think our vision is to definitely get there, but right now, only some of our business units are building digital businesses.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that answer. So it sounds like there are some early wins and some early, and you have a vision forward for how you'd like to do other things. Given all that, what are these 4 questions you think best represents where you are with your vision?
Definitely the one around some businesses are building, some business units are building digital businesses, because we see that as a way for some of these business units are more further ahead in thinking, and so they're leveraging the platform for looking for ways to monetize. But others are, just beginning and they haven't really got there yet. We're just connecting them to improve some of their existing digital channels.
All right, great. So it sounds like we have some early leaders that are emerging.
That's right. That's right.
All right, great. Okay, great. So with that, we'll move on to the next question. Now, APIs, how are they viewed today in your organization? Can you talk a little bit about that with us, Ray?
Yeah, I think a lot of people on the call probably will identify this one. I think depending on who you ask, any of these choices on the screen will probably be the answer. So it's difficult to pick one but I think I'll try to aggregate what I think the organization on our behalf is thinking. Primarily, we understand and we aspire to APIs being strategic for us. But at the first get-go, we still see it as we have a lot of API today. There's a lot of redundancy. We have a couple partners and we have systems and we need to connect them. So although we want to kind of be out there and think of it further than that, right now, I think primarily for us, it's about exposing those assets internally, connecting one system to another. Like if we have an authentication system, we have various core and fintech providers, and to those partners to connect them together right now.
Okay. So it sounds like while there's some, first of all, you're exposing out to partners, it's viewed more from a peer-to-peer connection perspective rather than it is from a product perspective your partners may select from or other things like that at this point.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it takes a while for us to pick a partner, and we're not going fully external right now, but we have some partners and we want to make that connection easier for them and for us.
Okay. So, when I think back to Ticketmaster a little bit here. So there's some technical wins to be achieved here with the API approach. When we look at things like architectural loose coupling, when we look at securing those connections outside your in a consistent way, being able to introduce policies that have traffic management capabilities, those are we see. These are kind of IT-driven priorities that may cause you to use that API platform when connecting with those partners in a way that may be superior to some traditional means, but we're still not looking, for example, as APIs as products, right?
Yeah, we're not completely there yet. But there's definitely some technical ones. You're right on in terms of where we are right now.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to select we use APIs primarily to expose assets internally or to partners. And we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this concept in the presentation today. So I'm going to ask, does your organization take a, quote, outside-in perspective when creating products and experiences for customers? Talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, I think this is one of our biggest challenges, being part of the enterprise and from a platform, API platform and a program perspective. Past, we've built a lot of APIs, but they were, here's what we have, and then the business consumes them. And even when I look at the poll results, like what you showed, Greg, that seems very similar to what others are facing, and that's exactly where we are. Now with the move towards being more agile and converging business and IT together, that's something that some teams are doing, and we're getting better at that. So if I kind of look at it optimistically or current state, if I say current state, our business, we build products, we have IT has APIs and the business consumes what we have. Optimistically in future, we know we want to have the business and IT converged. Okay, awesome. Thanks for that description. I mean, I think what I find interesting about that is, again, what I'm hearing is that IT is conscious of the fact that APIs can be used as a uniform exposure layer, right? That can basically drive functionality and drive value via those API channels, but it's an exposure-oriented conversation rather than maybe thinking from a consumption perspective and thinking about the end customer on the other side of that consumption piece, right? Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just a little bit of a legacy, and when we build our systems and we have service providers that are exposing their services and their data, it is from an inside out, and it is hard because when we build it, we want to create as many endpoints as possible, and we don't want to go back in the well again. So that's kind of this cycle that we're in. But we understand we got to break that. Start with the outside. Okay, Ray, that's great because I think that vision that you have will drive you towards a good product mindset. And one of the anti-patterns that we talked about and we often see is that when the API platform functionality does start to take hold and start to gain popularity and notoriety inside the organization, sometimes we see these initiatives that say we're going to start looking at every single part of our business and how we can expose what we have uniformly. And it becomes kind of a services exposure, boil the ocean initiative
that often, again, is exposure-oriented. And that's one of the key traps that we see people fall into a lot. Now, we love the fact that adoption is going up, but if we don't have that outside mentality, a lot of times we'll end up with a boil the ocean initiative, and we won't end up with consumer product fit that we're looking at because we're looking at it from an internal perspective. So thank you for that. I'm going to answer, we build products and experiences based on the services that IT tells us are already available. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, and the final question in the vision section is, can you tell us a little bit about and is engaging with its ecosystem of partners?
Yeah. Like a little bit like what I said before is there's a couple of partners that we have that we're working with, fintech providers and other partners that, we're already kind of agreed on our business deal with them. And so I think for us, it's security is always a big concern. And more recently, I think just kind of what you're thinking, what other partners are there? How can we mash up our core assets with others to create different streams of revenue? But from an ecosystem perspective, I don't think we're there yet. If I look at it, we have an internal ecosystem and we have the beginning of our partner ecosystem, but we have a little ways to go. But we like to build them.
Okay. All right. So which answer do you think applies best to your organization's vision right now?
Right now, I think it's about forming new partnerships and extending into adjacent markets because we have active partners. But for us, in order to expand, we definitely need to build new partners.
Okay. All right, great. So we'll go with, we are forming new partnerships and extending into adjacent markets. Okay. So now we go to the alignment section of Compass, and I'm going to ask from a leadership perspective, who is leading your organization's API first charge?
Yeah. I feel like we've been pretty fortunate on this one. Our CEO is really behind us. When you take a look at the bank's top strategic projects, we're in the top 3. So that gets his attention. And so when we come up with, when we talk about the need and our resourcing standpoint and what sort of buy-in we need, we get his attention. And unfortunately, there are a lot of different stakeholders now that I have to work with. So I guess that makes me lucky, right?
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you have a lot of interested parties, a lot of stakeholders, perhaps a lot of competing requirements and demands and viewpoints, but you do have that C-suite leadership in place.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. So our CIO, CTO is mandated an API-first digital transformation, correct?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Okay, funding. Could you tell us a little bit about the state of funding of your API program right now?
Yeah, so, being a large bank, right, we have, from an enterprise perspective, we have funding for the platform. So we're basically going to build the core infrastructure, get our pipelines working, have a clear governance. So we have funding for the platform. But when it comes to actually specific business objectives, we are going to have to go back and give quarterly updates to the steering committee. How are we doing? Is the ROI that was initially thought still coming true? And to provide progress updates. And so, for example, we're funded at our core team level. We've got the software funding, and we have some additional resources. But, if we need to go above and beyond, we're going to have to go back for funding. In addition to that, we have project teams, so let's say different lines of business that are going and utilizing the platform. They're going to have to go for specific funding for their projects as well. So I think our funding mechanisms are still fairly, legacy.
So Ray, if I can kind of talk that back to you, and you tell me if I'm on spot here. It sounds like there's a strategic platform funding effort that you do have in place, right? So that's viewed as just a kind of an operational cost. But however, the individual teams that may be seeking to innovate products on top of that platform are still in a position where if they've secured project funding, whether if they're using APIs, that is scrutinized and decisions made around that from a budgetary perspective within those product teams, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, our perspective here is we want to make the cost and the effort to build the next API as low as possible from a platform perspective. So for these businesses that want to innovate or build something on top of our platform, we want that to be as low as possible. We don't want to be their cost object. We want them to get in and use the platform, and we're bearing a lot of the infrastructure and the platform resources on their behalf, and also connecting together for reuse.
Okay, so which of these four questions do you think best represents that?
I think given where we are, I'd say we have a funded company-wide initiative to build an API platform. That's where we are.
All right. Great. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about how the effectiveness or the impact of your API program is currently measured?
I think this is a struggle. I mean, our metrics have been pretty poor, and a lot of it has been because there are some of it's in technical limitations. You know, we don't really have a lot of metrics. We might have a ton of APIs, but we just don't have a good way to measure them. Also, I think we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. We have some internal metrics and communication around number of APIs. Like we have, like 500 or so APIs, right? But it always gets challenged, right? You know, every time you throw that number out, people ask like, how many of those are actually used? You know, who's using them? And does that really mean that they're driving business? You know, and are they making the IT organization more productive and our business value increasing? So it's hard. And so at this point, you know, we really don't have a good way to measure the impact of APIs. And I know that from our standpoint, we have to get away from number of APIs because that number doesn't represent anything of specific value. It just looks at activity. So for us, we need to measure value. And we just, right now don't have a good KPI framework for that.
Okay. All right, great. All right, thank you for that explanation. Which of these questions do you think best fits?
So we do not measure the impact of APIs.
Okay. All right. Okay, so now we're going to move to software development lifecycle. Helping APIs internal to your organization and seeking to get them on the platform for consumption. Now, is your organization using DevOps, Agile, continuous integration and delivery, and other modern software development best practices in executing this API strategy?
I think we've been trying quite hard. And for the last 2 years, we made a shift to Agile. It wasn't easy, and not all the teams are following it the same way. Some of it's been a little combination. I think the key, your question is good because the key here isn't necessarily just about process. It's also about specific best practices from a technical standpoint. So we've been building up more DevOps. I think the challenge is no matter how great our pipeline or our CI/CD is, we get stuck on regression and automated testing. That's been a weakness right now for us, and our regression cycles are too long. So if we have great CI/CD pipelines that move, build, and deploy really fast, long regression cycle is going to slow our speed to delivery. So, looking at where we are, I'd say more than half of our software development teams are following the modern best practices, but we still have some way to go on the testing front.
Okay. All right, great. All right, thanks. But what I hear from you is that, you've identified some key bottlenecks that are holding your lead times back, maybe introducing some friction for people to produce on the platform. But it sounds like you have that in sight. So, kudos to you on that. Okay. Now, talent. Let's talk about your organization. Is it set up from a talent perspective for that API first program to kind of take flight?
Yeah. This one's also hard. We're somewhere in the middle, more than half or maybe less than half design and deliver APIs. I think it's less about, how many of our people are doing API first. I mean, we're certainly building APIs when we create certain services that they help with our integration. But I think the key here is that the quality and consistency of our APIs has not been there. So when I think of talent, I also think of, are we following best practices? Are we doing things in a consistent manner that encourages reusability and self-service and better documentation. And so from that standpoint, I think there's some improvement from that standpoint. So we're doing API development, but I think we can improve our design best practices and consistency.
Okay, so Ray, I'm just going to ask you. Yeah, fewer than half. So Ray, I'm just going to ask you a quick follow-up question because I think this pertains to some of the key points we've been hitting during the presentation, which is when you look at the business side, how would you describe the level of kind of digital and API talent from that perspective that may drive some of the considerations that we saw earlier in the talk?
When I look at the business side, I mean, one is we know that all developers need to be able to understand how to work with APIs. And if you're on the back-end side of technology, you've got to be able to expose APIs. So I think API is a core skill set that all developers need, and all business teams need to understand how to use them. And with more digital experiences, front-end developers are able to plug into APIs a lot faster, and they're used to that because you have all these applications out there, Google, Facebook, Netflix, and tons of other fintech providers that all have APIs. So I think it's a given that the talent has to be fostered and has to be built into the organization.
Okay, all right. So you mentioned fewer than half of your teams design and deliver APIs and only for special projects, so we're going to go with that one.
Yeah, and I think the key here is when we have to build our own APIs, we have to do it well and consistently. So it's not, if you have two teams that are working together and they're just handing over, lackluster documentation to get the project over the hump, that's not going to be a reusable API for the future. And so for us to scale as a platform, we have to do things in a robust, secure, well-documented manner. And that's a talent that we have to develop.
All right, okay. All right, thanks for that, Ray. We're going to move to the final question. So from a self-service perspective, what is available for developers to use the modern APIs across your organization?
Yeah. So right now, I think it's primarily manual. It's not nearly as what we've seen when we use, let's say, like the Google Maps API or what I mentioned before, like with Facebook or Twitter. It's very much a email to somebody within the service provider. We get an application key, and there's some link to a documentation, and off we go, right? So it's still very much of a manual process that we've got to today.
Okay. So when we talk about kind of that developer portal vision, kind of an entry point for people that may be making a purchasing decision or a use decision around your APIs, you'd say you're far from that. Sounds like you've got a vision for how you want it to look, but you're still pretty far from that. Okay, so which of these questions do you think best?
We'll get there.
Go ahead.
We'll definitely get there, Greg. I think we can get there. It's just where we are right now is dispersed. So we are manual, but we do know we're going to get to the developer portal, and that's a key objective for us.
Okay, so the vision's there. All right. So which of these questions would you like to go with, Greg?
I would say our self-serve process are manual with access provided in a week or more.
Okay, awesome. All right, thanks, Ray. That's all 10 questions. I'm going to hit submit, and I'm going to be asked to, I hope I can identify storefronts here. Okay, all right, now Compass is going to crunch the answers that Ray's given us, and we're going to take a look at the report. Okay, all right, Ray. So what we've got here is, we produce a digital score. That's from 1 to 100. So you're marked at 54, but I think intuitively and visually here, we can take a look at the Compass chart and see where you guys may be leading and where you may be lagging and what you might want to concentrate on in terms of obstacles or big rocks that you can move out of your way to get your program moving forward. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just want to share, because we've got about 5 minutes left of the session today. I just want to share with the group that may have been doing this along with us. First of all, thank you for your participation. What you're going to see with this report is, first of all, the ability to download the report and share it with others. You're going to see some great team functionality where you can invite others to this Compass assessment tool so that they can conduct assessments and you guys can compare them, share your perspectives, maybe understand how you converge on a common vision. Look where there are differences in vision or opinion. But you're also going to see here a series of recommendations based upon their impact to your organization you can take to start overcoming some of these challenges you face and to help your program accelerate and grow and scale. Okay? All right, so Ray, again, thank you for playing the role of Spider-Man, the C-suite executive inside the large bank. Glad to see, Spider-Man, that you've got a day job now, so that's good. Yeah,
I got some work ahead of me.
All right, but I think what we see here is that, guys, this Compass tool, you can conduct this yourself. You can share the results inside your organization. You can also, if you want to talk to us about coming in and conducting a workshop, or maybe you get the business and the IT side in the same room together, and you conduct one of these exercises, the value can really be in the discussion that you have around this exercise. And it's an opportunity for you to generate a sense of awareness and urgency around the key issues. So, give us, feel free to contact us if you have any questions about how you might do that yourself or how we might be in a position to help you do that too, okay? All right, great. So we're going to go back to the deck. I'm going to end my screen share. And what we want to do is I think we want to open up the questions. So we've got a couple of questions that are coming up. And I'm just going to go through what we've got here. So first of all, we're getting positive feedback on the role playing. So that's cool. Spider-Man, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And I think principle one, I think when we looked at the Ticketmaster example, what we are seeing is that's really resonating with folks. But if there are any other questions that want to come in, we'll just pause for a second. You guys have the ability to answer questions, and we're here to kind of respond to you and provide you with some discussion here if you'd like. Okay, what I am seeing in the questions and answers is a lot of extremely helpful people telling us that our slides were coming through, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. Guys, feel free to follow up. We're going to provide our contact information after the session, so if you do have questions that emerge that you think about after the session, please feel free to reach out to us, okay? I just want to point one other thing before we move on. You guys, many of you hopefully have an assessment in hand right now, and you may be thinking to yourself, how am I going to turn this into action? What's my next step? If you have some questions of that nature, if you're thinking through how this applies to your program, about what you can, what techniques and solutions that you can put in place to move these, as we say, big rocks out of the way, first of all, the tool is going to provide you with some recommendations on that, but feel free to follow up with us.
I see a question. Someone's asking to repeat the slide with the KPI measures.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take it up a level and talk about it from a KPI perspective. So one of the things that we've talked about throughout the presentation is the right KPIs and the wrong KPIs. And you can see that that's kind of been a recurring anti-pattern we've talked about throughout the presentation. I just will mention at a high level, we've got some materials that we can send out to talk about that. We're going to follow up with you, sir, after. But essentially, there are things called vanity metrics, where you may be looking at performance measures that are about on time, on budget for your API product. That's one anti-pattern. You may be looking at things that just simply talk about the number of APIs you've produced. You may be looking at the number of APIs that you've used that are being used internally. Those are API anti-patterns. The ones that we're trying to look for are those that say how many external application developers or internal have signed up to use this API. What's the level of signups and the trends of the signups of this product now that we made some key changes in terms of how we're marketing it via our developer portal and our developer program? What kind of ultimately revenue are we driving via these channels, right? What is our churn? How many people have stopped using these APIs, to give us a sense as to whether we need to rethink our product and whether it's being successful? What kind of properties or applications patterns are we seeing in terms of what digital experiences are APIs being introduced into? And are we seeing any patterns there that we can exploit in terms of our business or our product strategy? Those are the kinds of things we want to measure. Now, there's technical performance measures, there's uptime measures, there's threat detection measures. Those are all technical natures. But when we say the word KPI, we're often talking in terms of things that are about a meaningful business outcome via your API strategy, okay? And I want to encourage you guys to go on apogee.com just search for the word KPIs. You can see some great articles about developing the right KPI strategy. All right, and then feel free to follow up with us if you have any other questions. Okay? Thank you for that question. So what we're going to do is we do want to make announcements about some of the upcoming webcasts that we have. We have a great one around the craft of API product management that continues along this theme of how you view APIs through the product lens. Monetization, taking your existing APIs, rethinking them, relaunching them as products, thinking about how you monitor them from a technical performance, but also from a business performance perspective. That's coming up on November 8th. Strongly advise that you guys try to check that one out. It's going to be awesome. And then we have a virtual API jam that's going to be focused on security. This is going to be hands-on, walking through the tool. So for the folks who are more on the pair programming side, November 13th, the virtual API jam security one is going to be a great one to attend. Okay, so we just want to announce those. And then finally, I want to thank everybody again. I want to thank Stephanie. I want to thank Ray for helping and participating, and the three of us bringing this webcast today has been a pleasure. Happy Halloween, everybody. But we want to close by asking you, provide a little feedback. Tell us a little bit about what you thought about this webcast. We want to get better. We want to learn from the feedback that we get from you guys in terms of what you liked about this, what went well, what you want to see change, and what kind of webcast you might want to see in the future, topics that maybe you want to see covered. So I want to thank everybody for their inputs. And with that, I think we're going to close it out. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Happy Halloween.